Hello, this is Max. Today you will hear the story of a woman who fought for her life against a psycho-millionaire and all the trials she had to go through to save herself. You can subscribe to the channel after watching. It helps us a lot in realizing the content. While traveling to their new home, Elizabeth, a newlywed bride, idealizes the moment as her husband, Dr. Henry Kellenberg, drives. Upon arrival, Henry carries Elizabeth through the doorway and showcases the lavish house atop a hill. He introduces her to Oliver, his blind son, and Claire, the resident housekeeper. As Elizabeth explores the house, she discovers Oliver's impressive abilities despite his blindness. They share a romantic dinner and retire to their bedroom for the night. The next day, Henry surprises Elizabeth with a closet full of clothes, exciting her. He continues to familiarize her with the various rooms and features of the house, excluding one particular room that he deems off-limits. He makes her promise not to enter, sealing it with a kiss in the hallway while Claire observes from a distance. Later, in their bedroom, Henry informs Elizabeth of his absence the following day due to work matters. She expresses her concerns about being alone in the house, but he reassures her, encouraging her to see it as an opportunity to settle into her new home. The next morning, Elizabeth wakes up to find the bed empty and decides to explore the house to combat her boredom. Claire offers her food, but avoids sharing information about Henry. Throughout the day, Elizabeth engages in various activities, such as reading, enjoying a milkshake, trying on clothes, and wearing jewelry. As night falls, she takes a bath and notices the housekeepers leaving. Overwhelmed by curiosity, she succumbs to it and breaks Henry's rule, entering the forbidden room. Inside, she discovers a laboratory with cryogenic pods containing preserved bodies, including an unconscious clone of herself. Terrified, she rushes back to the bedroom, attempting to contact someone, only to find the signal down, intensifying her panic. Unbeknownst to Elizabeth, she falls asleep and wakes up the next day, still haunted by the sight of her clone. Suspicion fills her gaze when Henry returns home, playing the piano. Feeling uneasy around him, she pretends as if nothing happened to protect herself. Henry senses her unease and realizes that she has seen the forbidden room, calling her a good liar. Although she denies his accusations, he suggests sending the housekeepers home to spend the day alone together. Despite their intimate moment, Elizabeth has lost trust in her husband, aware of the danger she's in. In the middle of the night, both Elizabeth and Henry leave the bed. Henry gets her attention by calling her his pet, while wielding a machete and showing his awareness of her invading the room. Fear grips her as she attempts to escape, but finds all doors locked, forcing her to hide in the wine cellar. Henry waits for her in the living room, while Elizabeth, believing it's safe, cautiously makes her way upstairs. With an iron poker as her only defense, she climbs the stairs, only to have Henry grab her foot, causing her to fall. Helpless on the floor, she meets a gruesome end as Henry mercilessly kills her with a machete, abruptly ending both her life and their marriage. To conceal the evidence, Claire and Oliver assist Henry in disposing of Elizabeth's body in the garden, suggesting their experience in such matters. Strangely, they eat breakfast together the next day, treating Henry as an accomplice rather than their boss. Later, Logan, a detective and Henry's friend, pays him a visit. Logan inquires about Elizabeth, but Henry deflects the topic by redirecting the conversation to Logan's work life, offering advice to divert attention away from himself. In Claire's private quarters, Oliver pays her a visit and presents her with flowers, which she initially declines, asking him to stop being kind to her. He questions why she continues to serve Henry despite her unhappiness, but she mentions unfinished business as the reason. Oliver accuses her of being in love with Henry, but she dismisses his accusation as immature. To get rid of him, she reluctantly accepts the flowers. Weeks later, another Elizabeth arrives home, repeating the same events as before. Henry carries her into the house, gives her a tour, and presents her with marriage gifts. The new Elizabeth also inquires about the forbidden room, and Henry delivers his warning speech once more, to which she agrees to abide. Henry gets to relive their honeymoon with a different version of his bride. That night, Henry informs her of his departure in the morning, just as he did previously. Alone in the house, she occupies herself by admiring the paintings in the art gallery and dressing up for fun. However, Boredom sets in, and she succumbs to temptation, entering the forbidden room she vowed not to. Inside the lab, she opens a drawer and discovers her clone, which frightens her, leading her to hastily retreat. Unlike before, the clone awakens and appears disoriented, wandering around the house unclothed. Disturbingly, the clone enters the bedroom where Elizabeth is sleeping and touches her body as if familiar with her. Elizabeth awakens to Henry's morning greeting, only to be informed that he gave Claire the day off, leaving them alone in the house. In the bathroom, Elizabeth becomes increasingly frantic, grappling with thoughts about her marriage, the forbidden room, and her safety. Without consent, Henry enters the bathroom, wetting a towel and confessing his knowledge of her entry into the forbidden room. He attempts to choke her with a towel, but she manages to fight back and free herself. She rushes downstairs to the front door, only to find it locked due to the security system. In a desperate move, she grabs a knife from the kitchen, while Henry prepares halophane to render her unconscious. In the kitchen, Elizabeth trembles as Henry calmly approaches the piano and begins playing, allowing her to rise and take advantage of his distraction. Unexpectedly, he sneaks up on her from behind, placing the towel against her face. Elizabeth convulses due to the effects of the chemical, pretending to be unconscious, and then stabs Henry in the back of his neck. The couple lies beside each other, and shortly after, Elizabeth regains her strength, finding her husband lying in a pool of blood. She attempts to unlock the door using his fingerprints but realizes they are invalid, leaving her with no choice but to clean up the scene before Oliver and Claire discover what happened. She drags Henry's body to the elevator and decides to freshen up, removing any evidence of the events that took place. Exhausted, Elizabeth falls asleep in the living room and awakens to the sound of a ringing phone. She rushes to contact emergency services, explaining her predicament of being locked inside the house with no means of escape. However, upon spotting Oliver and Claire on their way to the house, she abruptly ends the call to avoid arousing suspicion. Upon entering the house, Elizabeth greets them, shocking them both to see her alive. Claire senses that something is amiss upon learning that Henry is upstairs, claiming to be unwell. Since Henry never stays upstairs, leaving Elizabeth unsupervised, Claire struggles to comprehend the gravity of the situation and suffers a heart attack in the kitchen. Emergency services arrive, providing Elizabeth with a seemingly perfect opportunity to escape or seek help. However, Oliver warns her that the police will eventually discover Henry's murder. Elizabeth confessed that she killed her husband in self-defense, and Oliver assures her that everything will be fine as long as she follows his instructions. Together, they collaborate to secretly dispose of his body in the backyard. Oliver discloses that Elizabeth is the result of a project called the Elizabeth Harvest, led by Henry and Claire, both doctors. They discuss the Forbidden Room, housing 6 identical genetic clones. Oliver reveals that she is the 5th clone in the project. Overwhelmed, Elizabeth breaks down in tears. Detective Logan unexpectedly arrives at the house for a routine visit, prompting them to prepare for his presence and deflect any suspicions. Logan is surprised to find Elizabeth welcoming him, as Henry never misses their meetings. Suspicious, Logan inquires about her call to emergency services, as the station received a call from a Mrs. Kellenberg seeking help. Oliver quickly intervenes, claiming the emergency was related to Claire's hospitalization. Though skeptical, Logan probes further, but Oliver surprises him by shooting the defenseless detective with remarkable accuracy, thanks to his exceptional aim despite being blind. Oliver explains to Elizabeth that he stopped one of the clones from escaping death, bringing her back to the house for Henry to kill. He reveals that Henry's sole motivation is to relive the honeymoon phase before killing the clones. As he shares more information about the experiment, Elizabeth becomes increasingly frantic due to her identity crisis. They return to the backyard to hide the detective's body. Oliver advises Elizabeth to pack her bags, flee as far as possible, and bring a substantial amount of money with her. While she's packing, Oliver walks in and asks her to read Claire's diary to him since he can't read. Out of sympathy, she opens the journal, but he locks her inside the closet, causing her to scream in frustration. Feeling defeated, she decides to read the journal to pass the time. The entries recount Claire's involvement, starting 5 years ago when she was invited by Henry to participate in his study. Claire's work on neurodegeneration intrigued Henry, despite opposition from the medical community. The journal reveals that the real Elizabeth, Henry's wife, died due to a rare medical condition after giving birth to Oliver. Unable to cope with her loss, Henry initiated the creation and harvesting of Elizabeth clones, enlisting Claire's assistance in perfecting the process by cracking the code. Messages and music were recorded and played each night to implant memories in the subjects' minds. The initial attempts at cloning were unsuccessful, with one clone displaying disorientation and mental incapacitation. This clone ran away upon discovering the forbidden room, but was returned by Logan. In the present, Oliver brings food for Elizabeth, only to deceive her and lock her in the bedroom closet. Frustrated, she screams after being tricked by a blind boy. Left with no other choice, she continues reading the journal. Claire's journal reveals that she found no birth records for the true Elizabeth, leading her to suspect that Oliver is not their biological son, but rather a fabrication by Henry. Claire confronts Henry about this suspicion, and although he does not deny it, he remains vague. Learning this, Elizabeth grows increasingly fearful for her life. While Elizabeth sleeps, Oliver approaches her with a knife against her neck, desperately seeking information from Claire's journal. Nervously, Elizabeth discloses Claire's suspicion but assures Oliver that he is not Henry and can change his ways. She attempts to seduce him to lower his guard, succeeding in obtaining the code to unlock the door. In a fit of rage, she repeatedly strikes Oliver until the sixth Elizabeth, holding a rifle, appears and aims it at the fifth Elizabeth. Confused, the sixth Elizabeth is faced with the dilemma of who to believe. She instructs Elizabeth to fall to the ground. Spotting a pair of scissors, she stabs Oliver and uses his body as a shield. Disoriented, the new clone shoots and wounds Elizabeth, but she manages to make her way outside in a desperate attempt to escape. Despite her fatal wounds, Elizabeth tells the new clone to read Claire's journal before succumbing to her injuries. The new Elizabeth reads Claire's journal, discovering the details of how Henry and Claire met and their collaborative work on the Elizabeth Harvest project. She learns that Henry's true intention was to repeatedly relive the honeymoon phase with each cloned Elizabeth before brutally killing them. Shocked by this revelation, Claire, although horrified, chose to side with Henry. In the present, Claire has recovered from her heart attack and returns to the house, where the final Elizabeth awaits her entrance. Elizabeth warmly greets Claire, handing her the journal and acknowledging that Claire has earned the luxurious home. Elizabeth walks away, ready to start her independent life. So, what do you think of this movie? Write your thoughts in the comments under the video, and also do not forget to put a like and subscribe to the channel. Goodbye.